I never imagined that doing a good deed for my neighbors would land me in the middle of a war with the most vindictive HOA president I'd ever encountered. But there I was, holding a $400 fine for excessive snow removal operations in my frozen fingers. My name is Daniel Irving, and I'd lived in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision in Naperville, Illinois, for 3 years without incident. I kept my lawn pristine in summer, my Christmas lights tasteful in December, and my garage door closed unless I was actively using it. I followed every single rule in that thick binder of HOA regulations they'd handed me at closing. Well, almost every single rule. The winter of 2024 hit Chicago's western suburbs harder than anyone expected. We're talking back-to-back blizzards, the kind that dump 18 inches overnight and then come back 2 days later for an encore. I worked from home as a software engineer, which meant I had flexibility most of my neighbors didn't have. When I wasn't debugging code or sitting in virtual meetings, I was out on my John Deere tractor with the Snowplow attachment, clearing my driveway. But I didn't stop there. Old Mr. Peterson next door was 78 and had a bad hip. Mrs. Chen across the street was a single mom with 3 kids and worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital. The Kowalskis 2 doors down both commuted into Chicago for work and left at 5:30 in the morning when it was still dark and treacherous. So I plowed their driveways too. Then, a few more. Then basically half the street. People were grateful. They'd wave from their windows, leave thank you notes in my mailbox, even drop off cookies and coffee cards. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because I had the equipment and the time, and it seemed like the decent thing to do. Besides, I actually enjoyed it. There was something satisfying about the rumble of the tractor, the clean scrape of the blade against asphalt, transforming chaotic white mounds into neat, navigable spaces. That's when Diane Pemberton entered my life like a nor'easter. Diane was the HOA president, a 47-year-old woman with severely highlighted blonde hair that she wore in a bob that looked like it required a weekly appointment to maintain its aggressive angles. She drove a white Lexus SUV and wore expensive athleisure outfits despite never actually exercising. Her house was the model home at the front of the subdivision, the one with the decorative iron fence and professionally maintained landscaping year-round. The first time she knocked on my door was a Tuesday morning in late January. I'd been up since 5, plowing out driveways after another 8-inch dump, and was finally settling down with breakfast when the doorbell rang. "Can I help you?" I asked, opening the door to find her standing on my porch in a cream-colored puffer jacket, holding a leather portfolio. "Daniel Irving." She didn't wait for confirmation. "I'm Diane Pemberton, HOA president. We need to discuss your snow removal activities." "My snow removal activities?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "I've been keeping my driveway clear. Is there a problem?" "Your driveway, yes, and also approximately 11 other properties in the subdivision." She opened her portfolio and pulled out what appeared to be a printed spreadsheet. "I've documented 14 instances in the past 3 weeks of you operating heavy machinery before 7 a.m. and after 8 p.m. in violation of our noise ordinance. Additionally, you've been conducting what amounts to a commercial snow removal service without proper authorization." I stared at her. "Commercial service? I'm helping my neighbors for free. The regulations don't distinguish between paid and unpaid services." Section 12, Paragraph 4, subsection C clearly states that no resident may operate a business or business-like activity from their property without written approval from the board. It's not a business, it's just being neighborly. Diane's smile was tight and cold. "Intent is irrelevant. The activity itself violates community standards. I'm here to issue a warning and inform you that continued violations will result in fines of $100 per incident. You're joking. I never joke about HOA regulations, Mr. Irving. The rules exist for a reason. They maintain property values and ensure a consistent quality of life for all residents. Quality of life. I'm literally helping people get to work safely. Mrs. Chen can't push a shovel after a 12-hour shift. Mr. Peterson could have a heart attack trying to clear a foot of snow. Then they should hire professional services or make other arrangements. Your personal charity work, while admirable in spirit, sets a problematic precedent and creates noise pollution during restricted hours. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. The tractor isn't that loud and I'm only out there during storms. It's temporary. The complaints I've received suggest otherwise. Complaints? From who? She closed her portfolio with a decisive snap. That information is confidential. Consider this your official warning, Mr. Irving. Have a good day. She turned and walked back to her Lexus, leaving me standing in the doorway, dumbfounded. I looked out at the street, where cleared driveways and sidewalks stretched in both directions. Who could possibly be complaining? I found out that afternoon when I stopped by Mr. Peterson's house to check on him. He invited me in for coffee, his weathered hands shaking slightly as he poured. The HOA president came by, he said quietly. Deanne, she told me I need to stop accepting your help with the snow. She what? Said it was causing problems, violations. She suggested I hire the subdivision's approved vendor. He slid a business card across the table, premium property services with a Naperville phone number. They want $150 per plowing. On my fixed income, Daniel, that's groceries. The pieces started clicking together. Did she mention anything about this approved vendor? Just that they'd give residents a discount if we signed up for the whole season. I pulled out my phone and searched for premium property services. Their website was slick but vague, listing various maintenance and landscaping options. The business registration showed it had been established 6 months ago. The registered agent was Michael Pemberton, Diane's husband. That evening I knocked on doors up and down the street. Mrs. Chen had received the same visit. So had the Kowalskis, the Hendersons, and practically everyone I'd been helping. Deanne had gone to each one, telling them to stop accepting my services and offering her husband's company as an alternative. It feels wrong, Mrs. Chen told me, standing in her doorway with her youngest daughter on her hip. You've been so kind, and suddenly she's acting like you're doing something illegal. Did you sign up with premium property services? She shook her head. I can't afford it. I'll just have to manage on my own. That night, another storm rolled through. 6 inches, heavy and wet. I watched from my window as the snow piled up, my tractor sitting idle in the garage. Every instinct told me to fire it up and get to work. But I'd seen enough of my neighbors intimidated by Diane's threats. If I kept plowing, they'd be the ones facing pressure. Instead, I did my own driveway and called it a night. The next morning, my phone started ringing before 6. First Mr. Peterson, apologetic and embarrassed, asking if I might reconsider. Then Mrs. Chen, nearly in tears because she couldn't get her car out and was going to miss work. The Kowalskis, the Hendersons, down the list. I'm sorry, I told each of them. The HOA says I can't. You'll have to call premium property services. By noon, I'd heard back from several of them. Premium property services wasn't answering their phones. The voicemail was full. When people finally got through, they were told the company was at capacity and couldn't take new clients mid-season. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Irving. This is Patricia Rodriguez. I'm on the HOA board, one of the regular members, not an officer. Do you have a few minutes to talk? We met at a coffee shop in downtown Naperville, away from the subdivision. Patricia was in her mid-30s, a lawyer who worked in Chicago and clearly wasn't thrilled with how Deanne ran things. I didn't know about the harassment until yesterday, she said, warming her hands on her latte. Deanne acts unilaterally most of the time, just informs the rest of us after the fact. The whole situation with your snow plowing caught me off guard. Did you know her husband runs the approved vendor company? Patricia's expression darkened. I suspected. She pushed through the approved vendor policy last fall, said it would ensure quality standards. But she never disclosed the connection. That's a massive conflict of interest. What can we do about it? I'm going to call an emergency board meeting. But Daniel, I need to be honest with you. Deanne has allies on the board. Out of 7 members, she has at least 3 who vote however she wants. I can maybe swing 1 more to our side, but that still leaves us short. So she just gets away with it. Not necessarily. If we can document everything, prove the financial connection, show the pattern of harassment, we might be able to force a recall election. But that takes time and resident support. I thought about Mrs. Chen's tears, Mr. Peterson's embarrassment, the growing piles of snow trapping people in their homes. How much time? Months, probably. We'd need to petition, get signatures, schedule votes. Meanwhile, people can't get to work or buy groceries. Patricia nodded grimly. I know. It's not fair. But if we move too fast without following proper procedure, Deanne will use it against us. I left the coffee shop feeling defeated but not hopeless. If this was going to be a long fight, I needed documentation. I started keeping detailed records. Every time I checked my doorbell camera and saw Deanne's Lexus slowly cruising past my house. Every conversation with neighbors about the situation. Every attempted call to premium property services that went unanswered. Then, exactly 1 week after her initial warning, Deanne sent me the fine. $400, delivered via certified mail. The violation sheet listed 4 separate incidents of unauthorized commercial activity and excessive noise during restricted hours. Each incident was dated and time-stamped, with notes about which properties I'd serviced. The evidence was detailed enough that I knew she'd been watching me. Probably from her car, parked somewhere with a view of the street, documenting every move I made with the tractor. I called Patricia immediately. This is actually good, she said, though she didn't sound happy about it. It gives us concrete evidence of retaliation. Don't pay it yet. I'm going to push for that emergency meeting. The meeting happened 3 days later, on a Wednesday evening at the community center building near the subdivision entrance. I wasn't technically invited, but Patricia told me to show up anyway. The meeting room was small and sterile, with fluorescent lights and cheap folding chairs arranged around a rectangular table. Deanne sat at the head, flanked by her supporters. Gregory Walsh, a retired accountant who seemed to worship order above all else, and Jennifer Martinez, whose main qualification for the board appeared to be that she attended every single meeting without fail. Patricia sat on one side with 2 other members I recognized but had never spoken to, Tom Sullivan and Robert Chen, no relation to my neighbor Mrs. Chen. This is a closed session, Deanne said immediately when I walked in. I invited him, Patricia countered. Given that he's the subject of discussion, he has a right to be here. The bylaws don't require resident presence at board meetings. They also don't prohibit it, unless you'd like me to file a formal complaint about procedural transparency. Deanne's jaw tightened, but she gestured to an empty chair against the wall. Fine, he can observe, but he doesn't get to speak unless asked a direct question. I sat down, keeping my expression neutral. Patricia laid out her case methodically. The conflict of interest regarding premium property services. The harassment of residents who accepted my help. The fine that seemed designed to punish good faith, neighborly assistance. She'd printed documentation of Michael Pemberton's business registration, call logs from residents trying to reach premium property services, even a copy of my violation notice. None of this changes the fact that Mr. Irving violated clearly stated regulations, Deanne said when Patricia finished. My husband's business is irrelevant to the noise complaints. What noise complaints? Patricia challenged. Who filed them? As I told Mr. Irving, that information is confidential from other board members. That's not how this works, Deanne. If residents filed complaints, there should be records. Written submissions, emails, phone calls logged with dates and times. I don't appreciate your tone or these baseless accusations. Tom Sullivan, who'd been quiet until now, cleared his throat. I'd like to see the complaint records too. It seems like relevant information for evaluating whether the fine was appropriate. Diane's face flushed. Are you questioning my integrity? I'm asking for documentation. That's basic due diligence. The complaints were verbal. I took notes. Where are the notes? Patricia pressed. In my files at home. Can you produce them? I don't have to justify my decisions to you. I'm the president of this board, and I have the authority to issue fines for violations I personally witness or receive reports about. Robert Chen leaned forward. Did you personally witness the violations? I observed Mr. Irving operating his tractor at inappropriate hours, yes. What hours, specifically? Diane pulled out a tablet and scrolled through it. January 15th at 6:42 a.m. January 19th at 8:17 p.m. January 21st at 5:58 a.m. The noise ordinance restricts activity before 7 a.m. and after 8 p.m., Patricia noted. 2 of those times fall outside the restricted period. Marginally, the spirit of the rule is to prevent disturbance. The spirit. Rules either apply or they don't. The argument continued for another 20 minutes, growing increasingly heated. Gregory Walsh and Jennifer Martinez backed Deanne on every point while Patricia, Tom, and Robert pushed back. It was exactly the split Patricia had predicted. Finally, Patricia called for a vote on rescinding the fine. 3 in favor, 3 against. Deadlock. The fine stands, Deanne declared. And let me be clear, if Mr. Irving continues his unauthorized activities, the fines will increase. We can go up to $500 per violation according to the bylaws. We could also vote to amend the bylaws, Patricia said, or to replace board leadership that's acting in bad faith. You'd need resident support for that. Good luck getting people to care about HOA politics. As the meeting broke up, I felt Patricia's hand on my arm. Don't pay the fine yet. We're going to fight this. But I was starting to wonder if fighting was worth it. That night, another storm system moved through, dropping 4 inches of light, powdery snow. I watched through my window as it accumulated, knowing that by morning it would be another mess. My tractor sat in the garage ready to go. I didn't touch it. By 7 a.m., my phone was ringing again. Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Chen, others. I gave them the same answer. Call Premium Property Services. When they told me the company still wasn't responding, I suggested they call other local services. There were dozens in the area. They're all booked solid or charging emergency rates, Mrs. Chen said, frustration evident in her voice. It's $250 minimum. Daniel, I know you're in a tough spot, but some of us are really struggling here. I'm sorry. If I help, the HOA will fine me $500 per property. I can't afford that. The guilt ate at me all day. I tried to focus on work, but I kept looking out at the snow-covered driveways up and down the street. Mrs. Chen's car was still trapped. Mr. Peterson's sidewalk was buried. The Kowalskis had apparently given up and called in sick to work. That evening, I saw Deanne's Lexus making its rounds again, cruising slowly past each snow-covered driveway. She stopped in front of Mrs. Chen's house for a long moment, and I could see her on her phone, probably taking photos. This woman was documenting people's suffering to prove her point. Something in me snapped, not into anger but into clarity. Deanne wanted to play games with rules and regulations. Fine. I could play too. I spent that night researching Illinois HOA law, diving deep into the Illinois Condominium Property Act and the Common Interest Community Association Act. I read through our subdivision's bylaws 3 times, taking notes on every relevant passage. Then I started making calls. The first was to an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. Her name was Rebecca Winters, and her website promised aggressive defense of homeowner rights against overzealous associations. We met the next day at her office in Wheaton. She was younger than I expected, probably in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling out a legal pad. I did. The whole story from the first time I'd plowed a neighbor's driveway to the deadlocked board meeting. I showed her the fine, the business registration for premium property services, the text messages from neighbors, everything. Rebecca listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. "This is fairly straightforward. The conflict of interest alone is actionable. The fact that she's fining you for helping neighbors while steering business to her husband's company creates a clear pattern. Add in the potential violation of Illinois consumer protection laws if she's engaging in anti-competitive behavior, and you've got a solid case. So I can fight the fine." "You can fight the fine and probably win. But Daniel, let me ask you something. What's your end goal here? Do you want to just get out of paying $400, or do you want to solve the bigger problem? I want to be able to help my neighbors without being harassed." "Then we need to go bigger. We file a lawsuit not just challenging the fine, but seeking an injunction against the HOA's enforcement actions, removal of Deanne from the board for breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly damages for the residents who have been harmed by her conduct." "How much is that going to cost me?" "In legal fees. Probably $10,000 to $15,000 if it goes to trial. But here's the thing, if we can prove the conflict of interest and the harassment, the court can order the HOA to pay your attorney fees. Illinois law allows that in cases where an HOA acts in bad faith. I thought about the money sitting in my savings account. It was supposed to be for a new roof in a few years, or maybe a vacation I'd been putting off. But what good was financial security if I had to watch my neighbors suffer? "Let's do it." Rebecca smiled. "Good. I'll draft the complaint this week. In the meantime, document everything. Every interaction, every conversation, every time you see Deanne or her Lexus in the neighborhood. If any neighbors are willing to provide statements about being pressured to use premium property services, get those too." I spent the next several days talking to neighbors. Most were supportive but nervous about getting involved. The HOA had power over them too, and nobody wanted to become the next target. But Mrs. Chen agreed to provide a statement, as did Mr. Peterson and 3 other families I'd been helping. Then I got creative. I pulled the subdivision's financial records, which as a homeowner I had a right to access. It took some back and forth with the management company, but eventually I got copies of the last 2 years of budgets and expenditures. That's when I found it. Premium property services had been paid nearly $30,000 by the HOA over the past 6 months, for emergency snow removal and seasonal maintenance services. The payments started just 2 weeks after Diane's husband registered the business. The HOA had a budget line item for snow removal of common areas, which was legitimate. But the amounts being paid to premium property services were double what the association had paid the previous vendor, and there was no record of any competitive bidding process. I forwarded everything to Rebecca. "This keeps getting better," she said when I called. "Or worse, depending on your perspective. She's been funneling HOA funds to her husband's company. That's embezzlement. Can we prove it?" The financial records help, but we'd need to show that the services weren't actually performed, or that she intentionally chose an overpriced vendor for personal gain. "Do you have access to the common areas? I can drive around and take photos." "Do that." Document the condition of any areas that Premium Property Services was supposedly maintaining. If they're not being serviced properly, that's evidence. The next morning, I took a thorough tour of Meadowbrook Heights with my phone camera. The subdivision had several common areas: a small park with playground equipment, a retention pond area with walking paths, and the entrance monuments with surrounding landscaping. None of it had been plowed or maintained. The park was buried under snow. The walking paths were impassable. Even the entrance area, which should have been the showcase of the neighborhood, was a mess. Snow had been pushed aside just enough for cars to pass, but the decorative landscaping was damaged from sloppy plow work, and ice had built up on the monuments themselves. For a company being paid $30,000, Premium Property Services was doing a spectacularly bad job. I sent the photos to Rebecca. Then on impulse, I posted them to the neighborhood Facebook group with a simple caption: "This is what our HOA fees are paying for. Common areas unmaintained despite significant expenditures this winter." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of comments within the first hour. People were angry about the condition of the neighborhood, confused about where their money was going, and increasingly suspicious of Diane's leadership. Then, Diane herself commented. "Spreading misinformation and attempting to undermine the HOA board is a violation of community standards. Consider this an official warning." Patricia jumped into the thread. "Actually, residents have every right to question how their dues are being spent. Transparency is not only appropriate, it's required by our bylaws. Daniel, thank you for bringing this to everyone's attention." The thread exploded. Arguments broke out between Diane's defenders and angry residents. People started sharing their own experiences with Premium Property Services, or lack thereof. Someone discovered the connection between the company and Michael Pemberton and posted screenshots of the business registration. By evening, the Facebook group had descended into chaos. Diane tried to regain control by posting long explanations about vendor selection and weather-related challenges, but nobody was buying it. The more she defended Premium Property Services, the more suspicious people became. Then someone created a petition calling for an emergency meeting of all homeowners to discuss HOA leadership and spending. Within 24 hours, it had 200 signatures out of approximately 350 households in the subdivision. The pressure was working. But Diane wasn't done fighting. 3 days after my Facebook post, I received another notice from the HOA. This time, it wasn't a fine. It was a cease and desist letter, claiming that my defamatory statements and harassment of board members violated community standards, and demanding that I remove my posts and issue a public apology. The letter threatened legal action if I didn't comply within 5 business days. I forwarded it to Rebecca. "Perfect," she said. This is retaliation and it's going to look terrible in court. Don't remove anything. Don't apologize. Let her dig herself deeper. The mandatory homeowner meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks out, the earliest date the management company could secure the venue and provide proper notice. Meanwhile, winter continued its assault. 3 more significant snowfalls hit Naperville, each one adding to the growing crisis in Meadowbrook Heights. I kept my tractor in the garage. I hated it. Every morning I'd look out at the buried driveways, the stranded cars, the elderly neighbors struggling with shovels, and I'd feel guilt twist in my gut. But Rebecca had been clear. Showing restraint now would make the case stronger. If I gave in and started plowing again, Diane would hit me with more fines, and it would muddy the waters. Instead, I channeled my energy into documentation. I kept detailed logs of every snowfall, every call from a desperate neighbor, every day that premium property services failed to adequately maintain the common areas. I photographed the neighborhood regularly, building a visual timeline of neglect. Other residents joined in. People started sharing photos of their own snow-buried properties, tagging the HOA and premium property services. The Facebook group became a running commentary on the winter disaster unfolding in our supposedly well-managed subdivision. Deanne tried to shut down the criticism by threatening more cease and desist letters, which only made people angrier. Patricia and the other sympathetic board members openly broke with her, posting their own concerns about financial management and conflicts of interest. The local news got wind of the story. A reporter from the Naperville Sun called me, asking about the HOA controversy. I gave a careful interview, sticking to facts and avoiding inflammatory statements. The resulting article, published 5 days before the homeowner meeting, laid out the situation in damning detail. HOA president's husband operates snow removal company. President fines resident for helping neighbors. HOA pays premium prices for substandard services. The article included quotes from several residents, photos of the poorly maintained common areas, and even a brief statement from Patricia calling for new leadership. Diane declined to comment. The story got picked up by Chicago media. Suddenly, Meadowbrook Heights was a local news curiosity, the subdivision where doing your neighbor a favor could cost you hundreds of dollars. A TV crew came out and filmed the snow-covered streets, interviewing frustrated residents. Mrs. Chen appeared on camera, tearful as she explained how she'd nearly lost her job because she couldn't reliably get to work. Mr. Peterson talked about the anxiety of watching bills pile up while the HOA demanded he pay for services he couldn't afford. And through it all, more snow kept falling. Nature was making my case for me. Every storm that premium property services failed to adequately handle, every impassable driveway, every damaged landscaping element, proved the point. Deanne's attempt to control the narrative and force people into her husband's business had backfired spectacularly. The night before the homeowner meeting, Rebecca called with news. I've been doing some deeper research into Michael Pemberton and Premium Property Services. The business registration lists him as the owner, but he's got a silent partner. Want to guess who? Tell me it's not Deanne. It's Deanne. She's listed on the LLC formation documents as having a 30% ownership stake. She's not just steering business to her husband, she's directly profiting from it. That's textbook self-dealing, and it's completely illegal under Illinois HOA law. Will this come out at the meeting? I'm going to make sure it does. I'm attending as your legal representative. I've prepared a presentation laying out everything we've found, the conflict of interest, the inflated payments, the retaliation against you, all of it. With your permission, I'd like to present it during the meeting. You have my permission. Let's end this. The homeowner meeting was held at a church fellowship hall because the community center wasn't large enough for the expected turnout. I arrived early and found the parking lot already filling up. Inside, rows of folding chairs faced a small stage area where the HOA board table had been set up. Diane was there, looking immaculate in a navy suit, her expression confident. Gregory and Jennifer flanked her, both looking significantly less comfortable. Patricia, Tom, and Robert sat at the far end of the table, creating a visible division. Rebecca arrived shortly after me, carrying a briefcase and a laptop. "Standing room only," she observed, watching residents stream in. "That's good for us. High turnout means high engagement." By the time the meeting officially started at 7 p.m., every chair was filled and people lined the walls. Easily 250 residents, maybe more. I spotted Mrs. Chen near the front, Mr. Peterson with his daughter, the Kowalskis, and dozens of other faces I recognized from around the neighborhood. Deanne called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. "Thank you all for attending this special session. We're here tonight to address concerns that have been raised about HOA operations and winter maintenance. I want to start by acknowledging that this has been an unusually difficult winter, and while we've done our best to maintain standards, weather has presented challenges beyond anyone's control." Someone in the back yelled, "What about your husband's company?" Deanne's composure flickered. "Please hold questions until the appropriate time. We're going to follow proper meeting procedure." But the crowd wasn't having it. Voices rose from multiple directions, overlapping questions and accusations. Deanne tried to maintain order, but the anger in the room was palpable. Patricia stood up. "Deanne, given the circumstances, I move that we suspend normal procedure and open the floor to resident comments immediately." "That's not how this works." "I second the motion," Tom Sullivan said. "All in favor," Patricia called out. 3 board members raised their hands. Deanne glared but was outvoted. "Fine. Comments from residents. Please state your name and address and keep remarks under 2 minutes. Mrs. Chen was first to the microphone. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "My name is Lisa Chen, and I live at 847 Maple Grove Court. This winter has been a nightmare for my family. When Daniel Irving was helping us, I could get to work safely. My kids could get to school. After the HOA stopped him, I've been late to work 6 times. I've had to leave my children home alone on dangerous roads. And premium property services. They don't answer their phones. The one time they did, they told me they couldn't help me. So where's my money going?" Applause erupted. Mr. Peterson spoke next, then the Kowalskis, then resident after resident, each sharing similar stories. Unpaid bills, missed work, near accidents on unplowed streets, complete failure to reach premium property services despite the company supposedly being the approved vendor. After the 10th resident, Deanne tried to respond. "These individual anecdotes, while unfortunate, don't reflect the overall situation. Premium Property Services has been maintaining our common areas under difficult conditions." "Have they?" I asked, standing up. All eyes turned to me. "Because I've documented the condition of our common areas every week since January. Would you like to see what we're actually getting for $30,000? Deanne's face went pale. "You don't have the floor. Give it to him," someone shouted. Others joined in. Rebecca stood. "Actually, I'd like to address the board on behalf of my client, Daniel Irving. If the board would permit me to make a presentation regarding the legal issues at hand." Deanne looked trapped. Refusing would look like she had something to hide. 5 minutes. "I'll need 10. "Fine. 10 minutes. Rebecca connected her laptop to the projector they'd set up for the meeting. The first slide appeared on the screen. financial and ethical concerns regarding Meadowbrook Heights HOA winter operations. For the next 10 minutes, Rebecca methodically destroyed Deanne's credibility. She showed the business registration documents proving Diane's ownership stake in Premium Property Services. She displayed the financial records showing inflated payments compared to previous vendors. She presented my photographs of poorly maintained common areas alongside dated receipts proving when payments were made. Then she showed the timeline of retaliation against me. The initial warning, the fine, the cease and desist letter, all coinciding with my refusal to stop helping neighbors for free. Under Illinois law, Rebecca concluded, an HOA board member has a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of the community, not their personal financial interests. What we see here is a clear pattern of self-dealing, retaliation, and mismanagement of community funds. These actions aren't just unethical, they're illegal. The room erupted. Residents were on their feet, shouting questions and demands. Deanne tried to respond, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Gregory and Jennifer both looked ready to flee. Patricia was stone-faced, but I could see satisfaction in her eyes. Finally, Tom Sullivan stood and called for order. I move that we hold an immediate vote of no confidence in President Deanne Pemberton. Seconded, Robert Chen said instantly. That's not proper procedure, Deanne protested. This requires notice, a special ballot. You can't just vote tonight. Actually, the bylaws allow for emergency removal of any board member upon a 2/3 vote of present homeowners in cases of malfeasance or breach of fiduciary duty, Patricia said. I checked this morning. A ballot was hastily organized, paper slips were distributed, votes were cast and counted. The result was overwhelming. 218 votes for removal, 19 against, with the remainder abstaining. Diane Pemberton was out. She stood up, her face red with anger and humiliation. This is a witch hunt. You'll regret this when the lawsuits start flying. My attorney will be in contact with all of you. She grabbed her things and stormed out, Gregory and Jennifer trailing behind her, both having resigned their positions rather than face similar votes. The meeting continued for another hour, with Patricia elected as interim president. The board voted unanimously to terminate the contract with Premium Property Services and begin a proper vendor selection process. They also voted to rescind all fines issued to me and to explicitly authorize my volunteer snow removal assistance. As people filed out, dozens stopped to thank me or shake my hand. Mrs. Chen hugged me, tears in her eyes. Mr. Peterson clasped my shoulder with a strength that belied his age. You did good, son. Real good. But the story wasn't over. 3 days later, I got a call from Rebecca. The Kane County State's Attorney's Office wants to talk to you. They're investigating whether criminal charges are appropriate in the HOA situation. I met with an assistant state's attorney named James Morrison in his office in Geneva. He was methodical and thorough, asking detailed questions about the timeline, the finances, everything I knew about Deanne and Premium Property Services. The civil side of this is fairly clear, he said when we finished. Self-dealing, breach of fiduciary duty, that's lawsuit territory. But there are some facts that concern me from a criminal perspective. Specifically, the amount of money involved and the potential misrepresentation to homeowners about where their fees were going. Is that fraud? It could be. Illinois theft by deception statute covers obtaining property or services through false pretenses. If she knowingly overcharged the HOA to benefit her own company while lying about it, that could qualify. We're looking at records now to determine if there's enough evidence. Over the following weeks, the investigation expanded. Auditors went through every HOA financial record from the past 2 years. They interviewed board members, residents, even the management company. The local media continued covering the story, now with the angle of potential criminal prosecution. I went back to plowing driveways, and this time nobody complained. In fact, several neighbors insisted on paying me, despite my protests. I finally agreed to let them make donations to a fund we set up for Mr. Peterson and a few other elderly residents who were struggling with winter expenses. Spring came late that year, with snow lingering into early April. By the time the last piles melted and grass started showing green, the legal situation had crystallized. The Kane County State's attorney filed charges in mid-April. Deanne Pemberton and Michael Pemberton were both charged with theft by deception and official misconduct. The amounts involved pushed the charges into felony territory, Class 3 felonies carrying potential prison time. I watched the news coverage of their arraignment on TV. Deanne looked diminished without her usual polish, wearing a simple black dress and minimal makeup. Her attorney entered not guilty pleas for both defendants and argued for reasonable bail, which the judge granted. The HOA also filed a civil lawsuit seeking restitution of the improperly paid funds, plus damages. Rebecca handled that case too, and it quickly became clear that the Pembertons didn't have the resources to fight on multiple fronts. In July, they accepted a plea deal. Both pleaded guilty to reduce charges, agreed to pay full restitution to the HOA plus penalties, and accepted probation terms. No prison time, but their reputations and finances were destroyed. Premium Property Services was dissolved, and they were both barred from serving on any HOA board in Illinois. The Homeowner Association rebuilt under Patricia's leadership. We hired a reputable snow removal company through a proper bidding process, one that cost less than half what Premium Property Services had charged. The budget was restructured to ensure better oversight and transparency. As for me, I kept my tractor ready in the garage. The following winter was milder, but when the occasional storm hit, I'd be out there at 6 a.m., clearing driveways for Mrs. Chen, Mr. Peterson, and anyone else who needed help. This time, though, I wasn't alone. Several other residents had bought their own equipment and joined in, creating an informal network of neighbors helping neighbors. One morning in December, as I finished clearing Mr. Peterson's driveway and looked out at the quiet street lined with houses whose sidewalks had already been cleared by a half-dozen different helpers, I realized something had shifted. Deanne had tried to turn basic human decency into a violation, to monetize kindness and penalize community. Instead, she'd accidentally sparked exactly the opposite, a neighborhood that actually functioned like a neighborhood. Mr. Peterson came out with 2 mugs of coffee, steam rising into the cold air. "Thought you might need this." I took the mug gratefully. "Thanks. Sorry I woke you so early. Are you kidding? Best sound in the world, that tractor, means I don't have to worry." He paused, looking around at the cleared driveways and sidewalks. "You know what you did, don't you? Not just with Deanne, though that needed doing. But this. You reminded people what it means to be neighbors." I thought about that as I sipped the coffee, warmth spreading through my cold hands. He was right. The whole mess with the HOA, as frustrating and stressful as it had been, had brought out something good. People were more connected now, more willing to help each other and speak up when something was wrong. That afternoon, I got an email from Rebecca. The civil case had settled. The Pembertons would be paying monthly restitution for years, and the HOA had recovered almost all the improperly spent funds. She'd attached her final bill, which was less than I expected thanks to the fee awards she'd won from the court. I looked at the number and felt a strange sense of peace. The money didn't matter as much as the principle. Sometimes you have to fight, even when it's expensive and exhausting and uncertain. Sometimes standing up for what's right costs more than letting it go. But the alternative, letting Deanne continue her corruption while neighbors suffered, would have cost more in ways that couldn't be measured in dollars. That evening, the neighborhood Facebook group posted about a winter cookout being planned for January, a celebration of making it through the previous year's chaos. Mrs. Chen volunteered to coordinate, and dozens of people signed up to help. Even the weather seemed to be cooperating, with forecasts showing a mild winter ahead. I sat in my living room, looking out at the snow-dusted street, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: contentment. The tractor sat ready in the garage. The neighborhood was thriving, and somewhere across town, Deanne Pemberton was learning that rules applied to everyone, including the people who enforced them. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Board meeting next week. Wanted to run something by you first. Would you be interested in joining as a regular member? We could use someone who actually cares about the community." I stared at the message for a long moment. A year ago, I would have refused immediately. The last thing I wanted was to get tangled up in HOA politics, but maybe that was exactly the problem. Good people avoiding leadership positions left vacuums that people like Deanne could fill. I typed back, "Let me think about it." But I already knew my answer would be yes. Not because I wanted power or control, but because I'd learned something important through all of this. Communities don't just happen. They're built by people willing to show up, to do the work, to stand up when something's wrong, even when it's uncomfortable. The next morning brought another light snowfall, just a couple of inches. I was up early anyway, checking email and sipping coffee when I heard the familiar rumble of my tractor. Confused, I looked out the window and saw young Jake Henderson, the teenager from 3 doors down, carefully plowing my driveway. His father supervised from the sidewalk, coffee mug in hand, giving guidance. I threw on my coat and boots and headed outside. "Morning," Jake said, grinning as he finished the last pass. "Hope you don't mind. Dad's teaching me how to use the plow, and we figured we'd start with yours since you're always doing everyone else's." "I don't mind at all," I said, genuinely touched. "That's really kind of you." "He's been watching you all last year," Mr. Henderson said. "Figured it was a good skill to learn, and a good lesson about helping out." After they moved on to tackle the next driveway, I stood there in the cold morning air, watching steam rise from my coffee mug and thinking about cycles. How corruption unchecked becomes normalized, but also how kindness spreads when someone models it. How one person standing up can inspire others to do the same. The HOA that had tried to fine me for helping people had unintentionally created something better. A community that actually functioned like one. And the woman who tried to profit from her neighbor's struggles was now making monthly restitution payments, a constant reminder that actions have consequences. I went inside and drafted an email to Patricia, officially accepting the board position. Then I spent an hour reviewing the HOA bylaws, making notes about sections that needed clarification or reform. If I was going to do this, I wanted to do it right, to help build a system that encouraged community rather than stifling it. Over the following months, I settled into the board role. It was less dramatic than the previous year's chaos, but in the best way. We focused on actual community needs, better maintenance, transparent budgeting, clear communication. We revised the bylaws to include strict conflict of interest policies and term limits for officers. Spring brought warmer weather and the neighborhood cookout we'd planned. Over 100 residents showed up, including some who'd never attended a community event before. Kids played in the park that had been properly maintained through winter. Adults stood in clusters, talking and laughing. Mrs. Chen found me by the grills where I was ostensibly helping but mostly just standing around. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, "for everything. Not just the snow plowing, but for fighting. A lot of people would have just paid the fine and moved on." "I'm stubborn," I said with a shrug. "No, you're principled. That's different," she smiled. "My oldest daughter is writing about what happened for her school project on civic engagement. You inspired her." That hit harder than I expected. The idea that a stupid fight about snow plowing could teach a kid something about standing up for what's right, about community, about not accepting injustice just because it's easier. As the sun set and the cookout wound down, I helped clean up, packing away folding tables and hauling trash bags to the dumpster. Patricia worked alongside me, both of us tired but satisfied. "You know, when I first moved here, I thought HOAs were just about keeping people from painting their houses weird colors," I said. Patricia laughed. "I think that's what most people think, but they're really miniature governments. And like any government, they're only as good as the people running them and the citizens willing to hold them accountable." Profound thoughts for trash duty. Hey, some of my best thinking happens during manual labor. We finished cleaning up as darkness settled over Meadowbrook Heights. Streetlights flickered on, illuminating tidy sidewalks and well-maintained common areas. It looked like any other suburban subdivision, peaceful and ordinary. But I knew the work that had gone into making it that way, the fights fought and battles won. The following winter was remarkably mild, but the handful of snow events we did get were handled smoothly by our new contractor, with me and several other neighbors still providing backup help where needed. No fines, no complaints, no drama, just people helping people. I kept expecting Diane to resurface somehow, to cause more trouble or mount some kind of comeback. But she and Michael had apparently learned their lesson. They kept their heads down, made their restitution payments, and stayed far away from Meadowbrook Heights. Rumor had it they were trying to sell their house and move to a different suburb, somewhere their reputation hadn't preceded them. On the anniversary of the homeowner meeting that had changed everything, I found myself standing in my driveway at dawn, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold. The tractor sat idle in the garage behind me, not needed today but ready when the time came. My phone buzzed with messages from the neighborhood group chat, people sharing good morning greetings and coordinating carpools, and asking if anyone needed help with various projects. The same technology that had once been a battleground during the HOA fight had become a genuine tool for connection. Mr. Peterson emerged from his house across the street, raising his own coffee mug in salute. I returned the gesture, a small acknowledgement between neighbors who'd been through something together and come out better for it. That's when I realized the most important thing I'd learned from the whole experience. It wasn't about HOA rules or snow removal or even standing up to corruption, though all of those mattered. It was about the fundamental truth that communities are fragile things, easily broken by selfishness or apathy, but also capable of remarkable resilience when people care enough to fight for them. I'd stumbled into that fight accidentally, just by trying to help a few neighbors with their driveways. But what came out of it? The stronger community and clearer sense of purpose and actual friendships formed in the crucible of shared struggle. That wasn't an accident. That was the natural result of people choosing connection over convenience, principle over profit, and common good over individual gain. The sun cleared the horizon, flooding the street with golden light. It was going to be a beautiful day. I finished my coffee, set the mug aside, and headed inside to start work, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges came next, this neighborhood would face them together. Because that's what we'd learned to do. That's what we'd fought for. And that's what we'd keep doing. One snowplow pass, one helping hand, one small act of neighborly kindness at a time. That's how you build a real community. Not through rules and regulations and fear of fines, but through the simple, radical act of caring about the people around you and being willing to stand up when someone tries to stop you. Everything else, all the bylaws and procedures and official structures, those are just tools. The foundation is always people choosing to be neighbors in more than just geography. And on that cold February morning, with the tractor ready in my garage and good people living up and down the street, I knew we'd built something that would last. Something no vindictive HOA president could tear down. Something real.